A curse in the sky. How the sieve with the eyes of an owl became an army's worst nightmare. Imagine the autumn of 1941. Scorched earth, the smell of gunpowder, and fear. You are a young Red Army soldier who spilled out of a trench just seconds before an enemy shell landed there. Your ears are ringing, your heart is pounding. You look up at the gloomy sky, hoping to see the silhouettes of our Hawks EX or Lavochins. But instead, you see that. It looks like no plane you've ever seen before. To thin tails, like a prehistoric insect, and between them the squat, ugly glassy cockpit, resembling a giant bulging eye. It drifts slowly, arrogantly, as if it knows nothing can threaten it. It looks like a flying sieve, a flimsy sketch forgotten on a celestial blueprint. And you realize with horror, hell is about to break loose. Because as soon as this Wehrmacht, as it was already nicknamed in the trenches, appears in the sky, in 15 or 20 minutes the earth will tremble from precise, murderous artillery fire. It doesn't shoot. It only watches. And its gaze is lethal. This is not just a story about an airplane. This is a story about an idea that proved stronger than armor and speed. The story of the Focke-Wulf Fw 189 WWII, the Eagle Owl. A ghost plane, a harbinger plane, a legend plane that, defying all the laws of aerodynamics and logic, became the most hated and most elusive eye of Hitler on the Eastern Front. The concept. The birth of a chimera nobody wanted. Let's go back to Germany, in 1937. The Third Reich is gaining power, its war machine is running at full capacity. But the Luftwaffe generals have a problem. The existing reconnaissance planes, for example, the HS-126, no longer meet the growing demands. They need a new tactical reconnaissance aircraft, but not an ordinary one. It needs not just good, but phenomenal, panoramic visibility. The pilot must see the battlefield as if in the palm of his hand, to record the slightest movement of troops, equipment, and camouflaged artillery batteries. A competition is announced. 3 companies present their projects: Arado, Blohm, and Voss, then still Hamburger Flugzeugbau, and Focke-Wulf. Imagine a commission of stern generals in polished to a shine boots. They are shown blueprints. And then, onto the table, comes the project from the team led by the genius of aircraft design, Kurt Tank. And what do they see? They see a freak. A twin boom design. A central glass gondola. This is a flying absurdity. It contradicts all the canons of classic aircraft design. Where are the streamlined, swift shapes? Where is the monocoque fuselage? This project looked as if it had been assembled from scraps in a junkyard. Surely, many thought, Tank has lost his mind. And now my opinion and reflections. Why do geniuses so often seem ahead of their time? Because they think not in clicks, but in terms of efficiency. Kurt Tank and his engineer, Kosel, weren't thinking about how to make the plane beautiful. They were thinking about how to solve the problem of maximum visibility. And their solution was brilliantly simple. Remove everything that blocks the view. And what blocks the view the most? The fuselage. They simply removed it, replacing it with 2 booms, and placed the crew in a separate, perfectly glazed capsule. It was a breakthrough. It was UX/UI design in aviation, long before these terms existed. They weren't designing an airplane, they were designing a workplace for an eye floating over the battlefield. And here I can't help but draw a parallel with our time. Today, all companies are battling to create the perfect user interface, to have everything at hand, for nothing to be distracting. Tank's team did the same thing 70 years ago. They created the perfect interface between the crew and the battlefield. No unnecessary elements. Just glass and a 360-degree view. Economic background and analysis. Let's consider, why was Germany, with its limited resources after the Treaty of Versailles, able to make such a technological leap? The answer lies in total economic militarization and state contracts. With the Nazis coming to power in 1933, German industry was reoriented towards military needs. Giant conglomerates were created, like I.G. Farben, which controlled the chemical industry, and, of course, the aviation giants Messerschmitt, Junkers, Heinkel, and our Focke-Wulf. The funding was colossal. If in 1933 about 50 million Reichsmarks were spent on the Luftwaffe, by 1939 this figure had grown tens of times. Competitions for new types of weapons, like the one for the FW-189, were not just competitions between engineers. It was a race for resources, for the Führer's favor, for a place in the sun within the military elite. Winning such a competition meant multi-million mark contracts, steel, aluminum, manpower. It was a matter of survival and prosperity for the company itself. And in this race, Kurt Tank went all in, proposing the most avant-garde and risky idea. The anatomy of the eagle owl. Why the crystal gondola was stronger than an armored fist, so, despite the skepticism, Tank's Project won. And the Focke-Wulf Fw-189 took to the sky. Let's mentally take it apart, piece by piece, and understand where its magic lay. The central gondola. This was a masterpiece of engineering. It was called a veranda, an aquarium, a glass coffin, the latter, by those who didn't believe in it. But it wasn't just a glass canopy. It was a carefully calculated, streamlined cocoon, consisting of dozens of plexiglass panels that minimized optical distortion. The crew of 3, pilot, navigator, and gunner, were in a single space. This created incredible psychological comfort and, more importantly, phenomenal situational awareness. The pilot saw what the navigator saw, and they could instantly exchange information by simply pointing a finger. Look there. The twin boom design. This wasn't just a quirk. It was a genius move that increased survivability. Imagine a Soviet fighter getting on the Rama's tail. A conventional plane has a single fuselage to aim at, where the crew and control systems are concentrated. The Eagle Owl had 2 booms. Hitting one of them was unpleasant, but not fatal. The control systems were duplicated. The plane could remain controllable even with one boom shot off or with serious damage to the tail assembly. It's like trying to kill a snake by chopping off the tip of its tail. It won't work. The engines. 2 Argus S410A1s. The power of each was 465 horsepower. Frankly, not impressive figures. Maximum speed at 347 kilometers per hour. Our Yaka-1 could do over 550. It seemed like easy prey. But here lay the second trick. The low wing loading and the aerodynamics of the frame made it incredibly maneuverable at medium altitudes. It could turn on a dime. Soviet fighter pilots, accustomed to dealing with heavy bombers or fast fighters, initially couldn't figure out how to shoot it down. It dodged like a fly. A direct attack from the rear was suicidal for the attacker. The gunner in his glass turret would hose it down with lead from the twin MG-81Z machine guns. A special instruction was issued to our pilots: do not engage the Rama in a turning battle. Attack in a dive, from the direction of the sun, from the clouds. My opinion. I am still amazed by this philosophy. The Germans didn't bet on speed or armor. They bet on information and survivability. They created not a killer plane, but an observer plane. And therein lay its strength. It was feared and hated not because it was terrifying in itself, but because it was a harbinger of death. It was the 1940s equivalent of a drone, an unmanned aerial vehicle with a crew inside. Technical analysis and comparisons. Let's compare the FW-189 with our Soviet reconnaissance aircraft of the same period, the Su-2. The Su-2 was a classic monoplane, fast and reasonably well armed. But its cockpit visibility was nowhere near the veranda of the Eagle Owl. The German plane could, without changing course, continuously track a target in a circle. The Su-2 pilot had to turn the entire aircraft to do this. The time for detecting and identifying a target for the Rama was many times shorter. As for survivability, the stories of FW-189s returning with one engine, with hold tanks, with part of the tail torn off are not legends, but common practice. The design forgave what conventional designs could not. After the war, these developments were carefully studied by the Allies. The American OV-10 Bronco reconnaissance aircraft, used in Vietnam, while not a direct descendant, uses the same twin-boom philosophy for good visibility and operation from unprepared airstrips. The Rama has flown in expect bombs, sacrilegious audacity, and psychological warfare. The combat use of the Fw-189 on the Eastern Front is a saga in itself. It appeared there from the very beginning of the war, and its reputation in the darkest sense of the word grew with each day. It operated with sacrilegious audacity. It loitered over the positions of our troops, over river crossings, over headquarters. Its engines made a characteristic, slightly rattling sound, by which it could be recognized from kilometers away. And this sound induced terror. Omens and superstitions were born. The Rama became a mystical omen. Soldiers knew if you see it, in 15 minutes an artillery barrage of such precision will begin that it was as if someone was guiding the gunners by the hand, pointing a finger, shoot here, right here, and over there they have an ammunition dump. An illustrative story. One of the most vivid episodes occurred on the 19th of May, 1942, in the skies over the Taman Peninsula. Two of our MiG-3 fighters finally intercepted a lone Rama. They got on its tail and let loose a long burst. The left boom of the Eagle Owl began to smoke. The left engine stalled. The Soviet pilots, seeing the trail of smoke, were already rubbing their hands on easy victory. But the Rama didn't fall. Losing altitude, it kept flying. The second engine was pulling. The pilot, using its phenomenal maneuverability, evaded further attacks. He managed to make it back to his own territory. The plane belly landed at its airfield. The crew survived, and our pilots returned with nothing, with a feeling of deep disappointment and bewilderment. How could this Civ have survived? There were cases when Ramas returned after ramming attacks. Imagine the fury of a Soviet pilot who, having exhausted his ammunition, decides to ram. With his propeller, he shears off half of the Eagle Owl's tail assembly, but the twin-boom design works of the plane, losing altitude, remains controllable, and eventually makes a forced landing. The crew survives. My opinion and psychological analysis. Here we see a pure example of psychological warfare. The Fw-189 was not just a reconnaissance tool. It was a tool of demoralization. It instilled a sense of hopelessness and of being watched. The soldiers on the ground felt as if they were under a microscope, like ants being observed by some higher being. This psychological burden, this constant expectation of a strike from the sky was perhaps even scarier than the strike itself. The Germans understood something others would only realize decades later: information is a weapon. Superiority in awareness is the key to victory. The Rama was the material embodiment of this superiority in the first, most difficult period of the war. The economics of indestructibility. How much did the Soviet Army's nightmare cost? Let's look at the Eagle Owl from another angle, from the angle of economics and resources. Was it profitable for the Reich? Economic background. Production of the Fw-189 was established not only in Germany, but also in occupied territories in France, at a plant in Bordeaux, and in Czechoslovakia. In total, about 840 aircraft were produced. A rather modest number by military standards. For comparison, over 36,000 famous ill-to-attack aircraft were built. But judging efficiency by quantity is a mistake. Efficiency is judged by tasks accomplished. One successful sortie by a Rama could disrupt a counterattack, destroy a discovered column of tanks, or an artillery battery. The damage it inflicted with its eyes far exceeded its own cost many times over. Internet analysis and my calculations. If we try to find analogies in modern business, the Fw-189 is not a mass product, but a high-tech, expensive, yet critically important service. Suppose today there is a company that produces 1,000 smartphones a day, a mass product, like the IL-2. And there is a company that makes 10 units of unique diagnostic medical equipment per month. Which company is more profitable? The second one. Because the cost of its product and its importance to the client are immeasurably higher. It was the same with the Rama. Its cost, including development, was tens of thousands of Reichsmarks. But the damage from one of its sorties could amount to millions in destroyed equipment, lost lives, and disrupted offensives. It was a force multiplier. It made German artillery many times more accurate and deadly. It was an investment in situational awareness that paid for itself many times over. By the end of the war, when Germany was losing air superiority and experiencing an acute shortage of resources, the production of relatively complex machines like the Fw-180-9 was phased out. But the fact remains, right up until May 1945, these aircraft took to the skies. On the night of the 17th of April, 1945, 21 Fw-189s from reconnaissance groups Nagar 2 and Nagar 15 made their final sorties. And on the 8th of May, the very last day of the war, the last recorded combat involving a Rama took place. They fought to the end. Is that not the best proof of their effectiveness and necessity? The legacy of the Glass Ghost. A lesson unheeded, the war ended. The Ramas were burned, dismantled, sent for scrap. But their idea lived on. Soviet engineers, having gotten their hands on captured examples, were stunned. They realized they had missed something important. An attempt was made to create not just a copy, but an analog, inspired by the German concept. This is how the Su-12 aircraft came into being. Alas, it was put into series production too late, in 1947, and never became mass-produced. The era of jet aviation was already dawning. But the very idea of a twin-boom reconnaissance aircraft with excellent visibility proved tenacious. My final reflection. What is the main lesson of the Fw-189? The lesson is that true strength is not always in armor and fists. Sometimes it is in the eyes and the brain. The Germans created an aircraft that was the perfect tool for a specific tactical task. They didn't try to make it as fast as a fighter or as load-capable as a bomber. They made it the best in its narrow field to be the eyes of the army. This story makes one think, how many little Ramas are around us today? How many, at first glance, strange, unimpressive, but incredibly effective solutions do we overlook because they don't fit our usual ideas of strength and power? Maybe your competitor isn't the one who shouts loudly and acts like a giant, but that quiet startup with an unusual idea that, like that Rama, already sees all your weak spots. The Focke-Wulf Fw-189 who will forever remain in history as a reminder, never judge strength by appearance. The most fearsome enemy is not the one who roars loudly, but the one who watches you, silently and intently. So, our story about the amazing ghost plane has come to an end. I hope it made you think and seemed as exciting to you as it did to me. This story is just one of thousands hidden within the history of aviation. To not miss new investigations and stories, be sure to subscribe to our channel. And now I'm waiting for the most important thing, your comments. Right, have you encountered the story of the Rama before? What weapon or technology today do you think plays the same role as the Fw-189 did then? The role of eyes, not fists? Or maybe you know other examples of unimpressive but brilliant inventions. Your opinion is very important to us because it's for this dialogue with you that we make this channel. Write, debate, share your thoughts. Let's talk.